Someone gave me these earrings a long time ago, and I was always hoping I would have some sort of Van Gogh related thing to go to that I could wear them to. And that's why I'm making this video. Starry Night is a painting which, as you probably already know, was made by Vincent van Gogh and inspired NASA to make real stars, just like in the painting. I've always wanted to do something a bit more ambitious in terms of cake decorating, and I thought this would be a nice idea because if it went well, it would look good, and it would be challenging, but it seemed feasible still. And it was challenging, but not in any of the ways that I was anticipating it to be challenging. It had nothing to do with how the cake looked. I have noticed that I hit 100 subscribers, so thank you for that. That is a nice milestone. I'm very glad that people seem to like watching these things that I make. I like all the little interactions and the comments and the suggestions, which are very helpful. If you have suggestions for things to make, do leave them below. Drop a comment. Woo! I'm always looking for new ideas because I am terrible at thinking of new things. My brain, she's asleep. She's very tired. Shh. She's been asleep for a while. I'm worried about her. Obviously, the first step in decorating a cake is making a cake. So we'll go do that first. Here we go. Let's... Cake time. I'd like to begin by addressing any potential rumors that might arise before they can possibly spread. Namely rumors that I am staying up past 1 AM on a college night to bake. That is completely false. Not something I would do, not something I am doing, not something I've ever done, especially not repeatedly every single time. I don't think I should have to tell you that because of the amount of natural light that is pouring in the window right now. You can very clearly see the sun streaming in my window. I wish I caught that eclipse that just happened on camera. Furthermore, any rumors that I am subsiding on an entire pot of espresso and the only mug a person who stays up at this hour deserves to drink out of are also false. Anyway, I'm gonna make a lemon cake because the painting has a lot of very distinct yellow parts in it and I feel like it's appropriate. And also because I like lemon cake more than most other cakes. This recipe makes enough for an 8-inch cake with 3 layers. I'm actually gonna trim it down with a cake ring. I only have 8-inch pans. I don't really have smaller cake pans than that, so I kind of have to. Anyway, I need to make the camera angle a little better. Hang on. You are actually stacked on top of 3 tuna cans right now, along with a mug, tea bags, and a biscuit tin. I'm going to start by putting sugar and the zest of 3 lemons into the stand mixer. I'm going to just paddle those 2 together for a bit. The original recipe actually put the sugar and the zest in a food processor and kind of blitzed them together, but this will still work. I've done this before. Next, I'm going to add butter that's been out at room temperature for a while, so it's a little soft. And then I'm going to cream them together. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but my stand mixer actually started to shake and move a little bit because of the amount of stuff that was in it. It's only a mini, she's only a baby, so it got a bit overwhelmed. Anyways, once those are creamed together, you can start to add in the eggs, which there are 6 of them. You can add them one at a time and just beat after each one. I also left these out of room temperature because they incorporate a lot better that way. If you use eggs straight out of the fridge, sometimes some of the butter will kind of cool and harden a bit and it doesn't incorporate quite as well. So everything being about the same temperature is usually a good move, good idea. Once all the eggs are in, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla and mix that in too. Okay, next separately I've got the juice of 2.5 lemons. I was trying to get to just 160 mils and that was enough to get there. And I've got milk in this jug and I'm going to add the lemon juice to it. I also have flour, baking powder, baking soda and salt all combined in this bowl, and I'm going to alternate between adding these 2 things into this while the mixer is running on low. The lemon juice and the milk together is going to look kind of unsightly and curdled. Don't worry about it, that's just what happens when you combine them. It's not, you haven't screwed up, you're fine. You're fine. This is a lot more better than this mixer was made to handle. I have to raise it to mix it properly, but it works, so it's fine. Okay, so the batter is now done. I'm going to divide it into 3 and dye each one a different color to kind of tie in with the color scheme of the painting. And then I'm going to bake them at 175, I think, until they are done, which will take, I think, 40 minutes-ish. When the layers are done, I'm going to wrap them up, put them in the fridge, and continue working on this tomorrow after college, because it is It is a time that I don't feel like disclosing. Anyway, this was the easy part. The decorating is where things could go one way or the other. I think the first omen that this wasn't going to be easy was that my 2 blue layers of my cake looked identical. There was really no discernible difference between the shades of blue, which wasn't great, but it was small. I could live with that. So I leveled the cakes and I cut them down with my cake ring, and that was fine. I was happy with them. They were going to do the job. It was mostly about the outside of the cake anyway, so didn't matter too much. As for the frosting, I decided I would go with Swiss meringue buttercream because I thought if I wanted to do something painterly, it would stay kind of pliable and nice and shiny and glossy for the longest compared to others, which can kind of get crusty. So I'm going to go over that kind of quickly now because I think I'm going to need to explore in more detail at a later date in another video for reasons that are going to be very, very obvious. Basically, you put egg whites and sugar together in a bowl over a water bath, and you keep whisking them together, heating them gently until they reach 71 degrees Celsius, or the point where if you rub it together with your fingers, you won't feel any sugar granules left. Then you beat it on high with a stand mixer immediately until it cools and stiffens, which recipes like to say this will only take maybe 15 minutes, 20 if it's a long time. It's going to take a very, very long time. I have found that no matter what you do to try and cool it quicker, it's just not going to cool down, because the thing is, the stand mixer wants to heat up too because you're running it for so long. So you're going to kind of have to stop it sometimes, maybe put it in the fridge, then put it back. After I think 30 minutes and several ice packs stacked up against the bowl of my stand mixer, I eventually got it to a point where I had stiff peaks and it was room temperature-ish. After that, you just take room temperature butter and you start to beat that in bit by bit. It's going to look kind of curdled at first, but it'll come together if you just keep beating it, and then eventually you will see it become smooth and glossy and you've got Swiss meringue buttercream. You did it. But it was at this point that I encountered the second omen, which is I knocked my tripod while my camera was on it.
With the lens extended.
It still worked. You know, my camera was fine. The lens image was still showing through it, but it didn't zoom in or out anymore. It was stuck. There was this little crack in the plastic on the side of it. As you can see, I replaced it. You don't want to know how much I paid to get this feature back. It wasn't that much. eBay's great. Life hack, buy your lenses on eBay. Despite the stress and the technical problems, I still had the cake to decorate, so here is the litany of chaos and problems that is my attempt to decorate this cake. For attempt 1, I started by sandwiching my layers together with a dark blue frosting, or at least as dark as I could reasonably get it. I thought maybe the difference between the 2 blue cake layers might visibly show up if they were separated by a dark blue, because contrast or something, but in hindsight that was absolutely not the case. I covered the entire thing in this blue, noticing that it was an interesting texture, just a bit grainy looking, but not so much that it should really be an issue, right? I made grooves in the top layer of frosting as a sort of guideline of where I wanted to put the large swirly areas. And I added a few small blobs of white frosting, which I would then use a knife to drag out into strokes, a bit like painting with a palette knife. And in hindsight, it doesn't look terrible, at least not on camera, but it did look quite visibly grainy. It was while I was blocking out areas that I wanted to put in the moon and the stars that I started to look at my progress and think, this doesn't look great. So I decided I would scrap my progress, remove all the frosting and make some fresh blue frosting. And going into my second attempt, I decided I would go for a much easier piping method. So, it's not going well. I don't know what it is about that blue icing dye, but every time I put it in, it just separates. It turns into a greasy, grainy, awful, disgusting mess. And the yellow is fine. The yellow looks perfect. It is the highlight of the cake. Those little stars. Beautiful. But the blue will not cooperate. And I tried putting some of it on to kind of cover the areas and see if I could fix the icing by melting some of it, then beating it back in, and then supposedly that can fix it sometimes. It didn't. If the blue icing would just hold together, this would be done. That is the one and only thing that's going on this time around. Although, actually, no, another bad thing happened, because the piping tip I used the most, one of my star tips, fell into a running stand mixer and got squashed. So clearly, every force in the universe right now is telling me not to make this cake. So, for now, for this weekend, I will stop. But I'm coming back to this. I will not cease until I've made the most beautiful Starry Night Cake this goddamn world has ever seen, excluding all the ones that are going to be better than whatever I make. So, attempt 2, no luck. Attempt 3 will be better. Thankfully, the class we were supposed to have at 9 AM is apparently optional. And needless to say, I am opting out because I don't need more stress in my life right now. So it has been about 2, maybe 3 weeks, so I think it's time to attempt this cake again. Also, obviously, I will die before I bake at a reasonable hour, so it is 2:36 in the AM right now. I've made the layers again, same recipe as last time, same method as last time. Once again, I did a yellow layer and I did a blue layer with the dyes I used before, but this time, for the dark blue, I have brought a new addition to the team here, which is a navy dye. It is a professional grade concentrated gel food dye. I think that's what it says on the packet. I'm gonna assume it's telling the truth. I used it in the cake layer and I got a much darker blue than I expected to, which is great. I'm real happy about that, but it's almost too dark for the color I wanted the layers to be. So now I'm like considering doing the like filling frosting in maybe white or something to make everything kind of pop nicer than I think the kind of dark blue would. Maybe. I don't know, maybe I'll stick with my original plan, we'll see. But either way, clearly this is not going to take anywhere near as much as the icing dye I was using before to get a dark blue, so this is a win. I am delighted. And then, assuming that all goes well, I can just decorate the cake, and we should be done here. For attempt 3, I did end up going with the white filling idea, and even before it was done I could tell it looked great between the layers. There was a very nice contrast, which I'm sure was in part because the bottom layer was the colour it was supposed to be now. I also did a crumb coat to match, and then I gave it a brief 10 minutes in the fridge. Once it was a little firmer, I covered it with my wonderful, smooth, cooperative, not grainy dark blue frosting. I made a sort of large upward stroke design around the sides of the cake as I went because I thought it's a very simple way that I can give it a sort of painting aesthetic. Although I did notice I could have made more of this frosting because the layer was a little bit thin, but that was okay. Back into the fridge for 10 minutes and then it was time for the main event. So I started with my large swirls. I put some white and some very light blue frosting in a piping bag and I piped them together to make the... Hang on, this looks a little bit, oh god, oh, son of a bitch. I give up. The light blue was still separating for some reason, and I couldn't even blame it on the dye anymore, because the yellow did too, and that hadn't happened before, so I am lost. I think it was a temperature thing, cold maybe. So I just made kind of a plain, kind of cream cheese frosting. It was just 1 part butter, 2 parts sugar, few spoonfuls of cream cheese. Cream cheese icing is in and of itself like a whole thing that I could probably talk about at some point, but not right now because this video is long enough and it's more of, this is not the most educational video in the world. It's really more of a learning experience. So I dyed my cream cheese frosting. I had a light and dark yellow and a light and dark blue as well as white. And then feeling more confident than my previous attempts, I gave it one more try. And I meant one more because if this wasn't going to work, I was just going to shelve the entire thing for maybe another year. So here we go. To decorate this cake, and I mean it this time, I began with some light blue and white frosting together in a piping bag to make the swirls in the sky. I put some behind where the moon and some of the stars would be too because I thought it might look nice, although I did change my mind about the one behind the moon later on. That part of the video won't be blocked by my hand, by the way. I also included the top of the sort of mountainous area of the painting down in the bottom right. After that, it was mostly a matter of filling in the rest with the dark blue, trying to stick with the flow of what was already there as much as I possibly could. See, this is the part I told you about. I told you it would be visible, see? But don't worry, I know you probably don't want a clear view of this cake being decorated, so I will cover the rest with my hand as much as possible, so you're welcome. Next, I put the light and the dark yellow together, and I used those to make the stars and the moon. The moon was essentially just one big swirl, and I tried to have the end of this swirl end in such a position that it formed a sort of crescent moon. I dotted on a few more stars to fill it out, and then all that was left really was the tree. For this, I took all of the leftover cream cheese frosting except the white, and I added a bunch of melted dark chocolate to it, which resulted in this dark bluish greenish frosting, which I piped on in thin strands, as you can clearly not see. Oh, there it is. You would think 4 attempts in I'd have figured out what camera angles work, and yet here we are. Finally, I made an elegant border of white around the top and the bottom edges of the cake to finish it all off. And at long last, the cake was complete. As much as I would have appreciated this working out after the first attempt, I am glad that I gave it a few more tries, because compared to what my first kind of method idea was, the sort of stroke by stroke thing, I really preferred how the final product looked. This is by no means how I expected this video to go. I didn't think it would be this kind of video, but I'm glad it was, because I think it is okay to screw up again and again and again. The more attempts that a thing takes, the more gratifying it is when it finally works out, so it was very gratifying. That is all for today. Thank you again for the 100 subscribers. I think it's 105 at the time of filming. By the time you watch, it might be more, it might be less, we never know. In any case, thank you again. I will see you when I see you, and until then, goodbye.